Deborah has given some of my testimony where our testimonies kind of intersect, but
You might not have told the story about the library.
probably not. I probably would have left that out, or the champion part, but I was a little less modest back then. But our stories are amazingly similar, even from the start. My mom she became pregnant with me while she was in high school. Um, she It would have been very convenient for her, and she had made the decision. Her and my dad made the decision to abort me, and they were actually on the way to the abortion clinic. My dad told me about this story just years ago, and they're on the way to the abortion clinic, and my dad says, I look over, and tears are coming down your mother's face, and he says to her, "You don't want to do this, do you?" And she said, "No." And he says, "Well, this is going to be really hard for both of us." And she said, I want to keep my baby." And they turn around, go back home. We're in South Alabama, so it's hot. I'm born in June. My birthday is in June. So she's wearing coats at a time, trying to keep her growing stomach from my grandparents, and she's their youngest child, so I guess by that point she's the youngest of 9, so they weren't paying as much attention for her to be able to get by that long. And she has her older brother taking her to the doctor's appointments, or to her pregnancy appointments. And so I am born in June 1981, and it turns out that my grandmother, who my mother was so fearful of, and she's gonna kill me, I'm pregnant. And it turns out I ended up being my grandmother's favorite grandchild. And she really treated me like a king from probably the beginning. So as we're living there, and eventually my mom and dad, they never were married. They didn't continue on with their relationship. But a couple years later, my mom actually marries, kind of same thing. I have a stepdad at this point, and I don't find out my dad is my biological dad until I'm like 7 years old. I knew him, but I knew him as my mom's friend, and I never thought, like, why do I look like my mom's friend? So that never dawned on me. But so I assumed that my stepdad was my dad. But in the interim, living there with my grandmother for the most part, and then kind of intermittently living with my mom and my stepdad, there was a major influence on my life with my grandmother, because she would tell me, "You're the best, you're special, she was openly biased and openly played favorites. So she would tell me, "You're better than everybody else." And I went into life really like thinking that. And when I went to school, I was actually we were bused. We lived in a poor neighborhood, right by the projects. A lot of drug deals were happening, shooting, just a lot of, we see police chases, all kinds of stuff. And
This is in Mobile.
This is in Mobile, yeah. We lived in Pritchard, which is like right outside of Mobile, but we knew, like, nobody sat by windows. Like, you don't want to be by a window because bullets could fly through and things like that. But so we were bused actually out to a more affluent neighborhood, and it was a predominantly white school that I went to, and more affluent. But I went out there even thinking, like, I'm better than these kids. So I would go and I would win. I would be honor roll. They were looking at me for like the gifted class, and I would win elections for student council. I won everything, and it was a pretty charmed existence. And I really thought that, even though where I was from, it reminded me of this the story I read recently of this guy was a billionaire, and he ended up being a billionaire, but he came from the inner city. I believe it was Baltimore or something, and they would always, the narrative would always be, oh, he came from the ghetto and now look where he is. And his mom, when they would ask his mom about it, his mom would say, no, he didn't come from the ghetto. He came from my house. And it was a difference. It was really a difference. And though I was in that environment,
Different culture.
it was a different culture. The house, what I was being told inside that house was different than what the kids
Shades of Ben Carson.
were being told. Exactly. So I'm thinking, I go through life, I'm thinking I'm going to win. I'm going to always win everything. I am just lucky and blessed. I'm going to do well and have a charmed existence. And then when fifth grade comes, I'm in fifth grade. By this point, I have just won the student council president. You can only be student council president. It was a big deal for me. I was like, I have been looking forward to this all through elementary school. I'm going to get there and I'm going to win. And I came up with this idea to because all the school could vote, kindergartners, everybody could vote. So, but the kindergartners and first graders, they don't really know fifth graders. We don't interact really. So I said, okay, well, I would get cartoons. I'll get my uncle to draw. My uncle was a really good artist, so he could draw cartoons that endorsed me. So I had like Garfield and Snoopy and all kinds of cartoon characters that said, vote for Terrell. So the kindergartners and first graders, I knew I could go around and talk to the fifth graders and fourth graders and things like that. But the kindergartners and first graders, they're just going to vote for who Garfield said vote for.
A born politician.
So when we got the announcement, they made the announcement, I won, and I became president. I was like, okay, that was the height of my life at that point. And I didn't see any reason to think that it was going to be any different. So that's first semester, fifth grade. We come back, and Mobile school shut down for Mardi Gras. So we had Mardi Gras. We would go to the parades, and that was a big deal. Like, we would go hang out. Family time was there. So on March 2nd, 1992, which happened to be my younger sister Tiffany's birthday. She was turning 9 that day, and I think I'm 11. I'm 11 years old, or 10. I hadn't turned 11 yet. I'm 10 years old, and we're waiting on my mom. We spend the night at my grandmother's house, and we're waiting on her to come pick us up, take us to Mardi Gras, and she never shows up. And we finally get a call. We get a call from my godmother who lived across the street from my mom. She said my god brother had gone over to the house, to my mom's house, and saw the door open. And he walked in, and he would always come over there. He'd just come visit. It didn't need an invitation. He would just come and show up, and come walk in. So when the doors opened, he walked in, and he found my mother lying on the floor in a pool of blood. So he found my mother in a pool of blood, and he calls 911, and he calls my grandmother, and we don't know what's happened. We don't know whether she is fallen or what is going on. And I remember this was my first interaction with God, because we didn't grow up in church. My grandmother had made the decision from when she was a child, because she went to church. She said she would tell us her mother was Baptist and her stepfather was Catholic. So they were either in mass or service. They were in some kind of church all the time, and she was in church all day. She said it was just so boring. She vowed to never go to church again if she ever made it to be an adult. So she made good on that promise. She only went to church for weddings and funerals. So her kids picked up those same habits. So my mom, being the youngest of her 9, didn't go. We didn't really go. People would go sporadically, but for the most part, Sunday was like Saturday to us. So I never learned about praying or anything like that. But when I heard that, and we eventually found out that my mom had been shot. She had been shot in the head. And so I prayed, or more begged God, to don't let her die. I can remember like screaming, crying. So she was alive, and the doctors went in. They did emergency surgery once they found out that she had been shot, to get get as much of the bullet fragments out as they could. And she remained alive, but she was in a coma. So we're walking through this, and like I said, this was I was completely disabused of the notion that my life was going to be a charmed existence, because all my minor gains at that point were like essentially negated. So where I thought, okay, I'm special, I'm different, that turned. It's like, oh, I'm special and I'm different, but not. Excuse me. Not in the way that I had perceived before. Because I didn't know any other kids that were going through that. So she stays in a coma for probably a month. And she comes out of the coma, and it was a real answer, I believe, answer to prayer, or to my begging prayer. So, but she is at that point she tells what happens. She's able to come out, and she says 2 guys came into her house. One of them she actually knew. He was actually friends with my stepdad at the time, and it was a friend of his. So they came in, made her sit on the floor, took jewelry, guns. My stepdad at the time had a lot of really big gun collection. So they took guns and all kinds of stuff, and she just remembers sitting on the floor begging for her life. And thank you. So she's sitting there. I think this would be easier after all these years. And the last thing that she remembered was sitting there begging for her life and telling them that she has children. And they can have whatever, you can have whatever you want, just don't hurt me. And they, one of them put the 9mm at the top of her head and shot her in the top of her head, point blank range. And so she told about that, and she remembered who it was. And so she's out of the coma, but she's at the time 29. Yeah, 28, 29 years old. She can't walk anymore. She can't walk anymore. She can't use her left arm. So she's left with the use of her right arm, and she can move her head. So she that the relationship with her and my stepdad at the time, it deteriorates. Just everything surrounding that. There was suspicion. She didn't trust him, in my opinion, and with good reason. But she's paralyzed at this point, and once she finally gets out of the hospital, she comes to my grandparents' house. So we're living there. She and myself and my two sisters at first, and then my stepdad take them with him, and they're going through. He gets custody of them because he says, well, she's not able to take care of them, and so the court gives him custody, and my mom has visitation, but we're there, and she's an adult, but she's in the most, probably more dependent than she's ever been in her life, besides being a newborn. So she's back in her parents' house, my grandparents, and I never blamed them, but they start to they kind of go back into parent role, into parent mode, parent-child mode, but she's an adult. In her mind, her thinking, though she's incapacitated to a large degree. So she starts to really chafe under that. So she tells me one day, she says, well, we're leaving. And I thought she was joking. I said, I'm looking, I didn't say it because I wouldn't dare say anything like smart back to her or anything, but I thought in my mind, it's like, we're leaving. Like, you're paralyzed and I'm 12. How are we leaving? So I was like, okay, yeah, she's saying that, but we're not going anywhere because it's easier if we're here. We have all the support here. And so one day she's telling me, she's like, all right, start packing your stuff. I was like, okay, she's going a little bit far with this. And sure enough, we pack up. She has an apartment, and we move. We move out of my grandparents' house and into an apartment, to a 1-bedroom apartment. Excuse me. So we move into a 1-bedroom apartment. And this is a complete, like, shift for me. Because she can't do the things that we take for granted. I've asked people before, like, okay, well, how many times did you roll over in bed last night? Most people couldn't tell you. You just roll over when if you get uncomfortable, you want to get the cooler side of the pillow, whatever. You just you do that, and you're not counting it. I said, but I knew how many times she rolled over because I had to get up and roll her over. If she got uncomfortable, I got up, moved her to another side, helped her with tying her shoes. Tying her shoes, helping her with brushing teeth. I would take her out of I was in school, obviously. I'm 12, 13, 14. While we're living together, just us. And we had help come over. My sisters would visit on the weekend, and so that would be a help, especially my middle sister. My younger sister was really young, so she wasn't a whole lot of help, but we're glad to have her there, and she did what she could. Uh, but my aunt lived in the complex with us, so she would come over and help. And I had another aunt, so we had people come over, but a lot of times it was she and I, and we were kind of navigating that. So she would, when I got up for school, I would get her out of bed. We used this thing called a Hoyer lift, like a hydraulic pump. I put a pad under her and connect these chains, pump her out of the bed, put her in her wheelchair, and at first sit her by the door, so she can unlock the door, and she'll be by the door. I would sit her by the door with her. She was in her wheelchair, watching her soap operas with a 38. I gave her, well, my grandmother gave her a 38 pistol, so I made sure she had that with her in case anybody came to the door or tried to come in because we were obviously, with everything that happened, we were very on guard about things like that. So I would come home. When I got home from school, take her out of the wheelchair, put her back in the bed. So time goes on. She's eventually diagnosed with breast cancer during this time. Her body isn't strong enough to take chemotherapy, so she has a double mastectomy, and they think that gets rid of the cancer, and I think it did at a certain point. But with me being a kid, she didn't talk to me a whole lot about it, and that's kind of our family culture. Like the adults kind of just didn't talk to kids about those kinds of things, so you were in the dark until it's like a extreme need to know kind of basis. So I didn't even know really. Excuse me. I didn't know really about the cancer the first time. So she went through that, and I look back on it now, and it's amazing because for me, she's an adult. She's old to me at that point. But I look back, she's really young, 20s, going through 20s, early 30s, going through this stuff. So I remember her. I do remember this about her. I never heard her complain. Yeah. I never heard her ask why. Why is this happening to me? And I guess it kind of, I didn't think about it at the time, but that was kind of imparted into me because I never asked why either. I just said, okay, this is the new thing. And we kind of went through it. And so we, after a while, we're living on, and she ends up testifying against one of the guys, my stepdad's friend, and he ends up being convicted by a jury. This was in 1995, so fast forward from 92 all the way through to 95. But he's convicted and he's sentenced to like 20 years. But so that's July of 95. We find out just a little bit later. I wake up because I sleep. But at this point we're in a 2-bedroom, but I still sleep in the room with her because sometimes I didn't. Deborah will tell you right now, I sleep really hard once I go out. I am out. It's hard to. I don't hear stuff out. There could be all kinds of stuff going on around me. Once I'm asleep, I'm asleep. So, and I credit hurricanes growing up, sleeping through hurricanes for that. But So sometimes I didn't hear her. Like if I was sleeping in my room, she would call me and I didn't hear her. I like literally didn't hear her. So I was like, okay, well, she said, all right, you got to sleep in here with me because if I need you, I can't have you to be in there. So I slept on we called it an egg crate. But the thing is, I don't know if they do it at the hospital, but they used to put them on the beds. They're not styrofoam, these foam mattress covers, I guess. So I slept on that in her room. So one early morning, probably 3 o'clock in the morning, I hear her saying something. I don't remember what she was saying, but I woke up and she continued to say that same phrase. And I'm like, okay, this is not right. And she was having a seizure because she had some issues with she had a brain fluid dripping through her nasal passage there, and so she had started having seizures from the gunshot wound. So this time she was having a seizure, so I called 911. Call my grandmother, call my aunt, and everybody rushes over and they take her to the hospital. And it turned out that the cancer had come back. And she is 32 at this time. She's 32 years old and I'm 13. And she goes into the hospital and they say the cancer's come back, and the doctors tell us that there's nothing that they can do at this point. So she gets really after that, I don't remember her talking much. After the seizures, I don't really remember her like hearing from her much, but she kind of she knows what's happening. She knows, and we get the news, and we're trying to process it. So from the trial July, then the cancer diagnosis, or that it was back. September, my grandparents tell me, my grandmother picked me up, and I was actually at a friend's house and told me that she had passed on September 10th of 95. So at this point, that's my freshman year of high school. I just started my freshman year of high school, and she's gone, and I am going back. I'm living with my grandparents. I moved back. I wasn't in the apartment anymore. I moved back with my grandparents, and I am living, starting to, I guess, I'm not an adult, obviously, but I am with my grandparents. They're older, obviously, and it's more mellow as to what I can do, especially with boys. My grandmother was just like that with boys. Like girls, she would, but boys is like, okay, you do what you want. So I am going, starting to date and all these things, and I'm looking around, and it wasn't uncommon in our family, just like Deborah was talking about, to see adultery, to see people being unfaithful in marriages, much less just relationships. So that was kind of the environment that I knew. Alcoholism, people drink a lot. Not some people smoke marijuana, so I'm picking up on these things, and as I get a little older, I started to as a teenager, I started to drink, and smoke marijuana myself. Um, and I'm in illicit relationships and just doing the things that I'm thinking that our generation is inventing. It didn't dawn on me that we were just picking, like you said, we're just kind of picking up the culture. It's just a new iteration.
It's already mapped for you.
It's already there.
You're just walking it out. It's in the music. It's in the media. It's in your friends. It's everywhere.
Yes.
It's inevitable.
Yeah. So I'm thinking we're doing a new thing, and I'm doing all that, and my grades have fallen off. Those days of honor roll and all that were long gone. They were gone after my mom was shot. Like, as I was going into middle school, wouldn't make an excuse or wouldn't blame it, but I do see it when I look back on the patterns. I can see that, like, I did Jordan Peterson self-authoring, and it helped me to, like, see some, like, oh, that thing right there.
Yeah, you give the 12-year-old a break when he's the primary caregiver for an invalid parent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, school was not I did whatever. I didn't care really to make good grades anymore. So I took that attitude. So that's going from elementary to middle school. She shot 5th grade, and from 8th grade to 9th grade, she dies beginning of 9th grade. So I continue on with, I just don't care. I am going to chase girls. I'm going to have as many girls as I can. I'm going to skip school. I'm going to do everything that I can, everything I want to do. I am going to take some pleasure out of this life. And so I was pursuing happiness in my mind. Like, do what I want to do. And so I that's what I did. So I started going to church after back up. My mom actually, we started going to a church. We ended up going to a Mormon church. Because some missionaries, my mom saw, they got a DVD, not a DVD. It wouldn't have been a DVD back then. It was a VHS back then, somehow, from the Mormon church. And she's like, we're going to go to this church. And these missionaries are coming over. And the missionaries came over, and I'm like, oh no. Like, we're going to, not only do we have to go to church, but they're going to come here. So I'm like, okay, this is not part of the program that I want to be in. So the missionaries came over, and they were young guys. They were like 21, and they would come hang out with me, play video games with me. We played basketball together, and I ended up liking them because they cursed like I cursed. All the stuff that I did, it was like they were just like me. They were like doing their bid. Because I guess you grow up in Mormon church, you go out 2 years missionary tour, but
it's required.
It's just required. And so they were just like me. I was like, oh, and they were white guys, and they were just coming. We were playing video games. They would start cursing, and we all just would. In my mind, in my world, this was so comfortable to me. It's like, you guys are just like my people. So my mom, I don't know. I never asked her, but I believe that she was looking for something different. So we ended up in the Mormon church, but I remember being there, and it was just boring. I would sneak out of there and go into the gym and play basketball because it was just mind-numbingly boring. So the next time I ended up going to church was my aunt went to a Baptist church. And so I would go there my mom, it was my mom's sister, so all of my cousins and I, we were closer than most cousins are because our moms were so close. So we end up we were like siblings. There's much time that we spent around each other. So I would go, I'm like, okay, I'm going to hang out with them. They're going to church. I'll go hang out too. And I go there and it's a Baptist church, and it's like, well, I meet some girls there, and it's like, okay, well, this is cool. I'll just come here for the girls. I don't really listen to what what is happening otherwise. And it was just a kind of a social gathering. So we go from that's high school. I get to I get to the end of high school, and I start thinking. It's like a spark comes back to me because when I was probably in third grade, we had career day, and I said, I don't know where I got the idea from. I didn't know any lawyers. I knew people that needed lawyers, but I didn't know any lawyers. So but when it was time for me to draw what I was going to do, I drew myself with a suit and a briefcase. And I was going to be a lawyer. And I didn't know where the idea came from, but a spark came back to me in high school. I was in my senior year of high school, and I'm sitting there with every bit of a 1.5 GPA. And I thought, man, this is almost over. I got to do something with my life. I got to start doing better. So I ended up doing really well my senior year, and they got my GPA up to a 1.7. So I decided my senior year, I was like, okay, I need another opportunity. I need something to do. So I decided I was going to go to the Marine Corps. So I signed up for the delayed entry program. And I said, okay, I'm going to the Marine Corps. They'll pay for college. And then I can get this whole becoming a lawyer thing back on track. And so I signed up, and I get ready. I start training with the Marines that are stationed in Mobile. Like there's some reconnaissance guys that are stationed down there. So I'm training with them, and we're getting ready for boot camp. And I'm about to ship. My cousin and I are about to ship to Parris Island. We go to Montgomery. We're at the MEPS, and we're about to ship to Parris Island. And I am in the office talking to the gunny sergeant about to sign my active duty paperwork. And I'm reading over it, and the gunny sergeant said, "Oh, it's the same thing that you've already signed. It's just active duty now. You signed it already for delayed entry." I said, "Well, I'm sure it is, but I'll just read it anyway." And I get to the MOS, the job. MOS is the job in the military, and it doesn't have the name of the job. My job was supposed to be legal administration, and because this was how I was going to get back on track and turn my life around. So I go and I read, and I get to the MOS, and it says the code is 0311. Now, I don't know my actual code for my job, but I know 0311 because the guys I train with, the reconnaissance guys, are 0311, and they're proud of their code. Like nobody else really goes around, that I can think of, goes around like, okay, we're 0311. The legal admin guys aren't like boasting about their code. So I said, oh, this is 0311. This is not what I'm supposed to have. And the gunny sergeant tells me, don't worry about it. We'll fix it. Just go on. We'll ship, and we'll fix it while you're in boot camp. And I remember thinking, the old phrase, I wasn't born at night. I was born at night, but not last night. And I thought I wasn't even born at night. I was born at 2:00 in the daytime. And I figured, I said, okay, I'm 17 at this time. But I thought, yeah, right. I go to boot camp, and then I say, hey, gunny sergeant's supposed to fix it. My job is supposed to be legal admin. And gunny sergeant said, I don't know what you're talking about. So I said, no, I think what I'm going to do is go back to Mobile. Like I shifted. It was an in-game adjustment. I'm going to go back to Mobile, and I'm going to start at community college because that's the only college that would let me in. So I go back, and they go through. The recruiter comes back to try to convince me to go on and ship. And I said, no, I really don't trust you guys at this point. So he has the gunny sergeant call another gunny sergeant. I had experience with a bunch of gunny sergeants during this time. He has another one call me, and he tells me, well, you're going. You've already signed. You're going. That you can get the notion out of your head that you're not going. And so I tell him, well, Gunny, your problem is that you have a recruiter here that's trying to convince me to go. And if you could make me go, he wouldn't be here trying to convince me to go. So at this point, my dad has arrived. And anybody that knows my dad knows that when he asked to speak to him, thinking that he was going to have a more respectful and rational conversation, he says, well, let me speak to your dad. You're talking to you is like talking to a brick wall. And I'm like, okay.
Little did he know he was going to speak to the only black member of the Sons of the Confederacy.
Yes. And a person that had been through being waterboarded in the military. So he wasn't too keen on his son being in the military in the first place. So he talked to him, and my dad just not respectful at all. At least I was being respectful, telling him no. So we go back and we end up, he said, well, come to the recruiter station. My dad and I and my cousin go to the recruiter station. He says, another gunny sergeant calls in from Virginia, and they realized that the tough approach wasn't going to work. So he's going to use like psychology on me. He says, well, I know you think we have misled you and you don't trust things right now, and you had a bad experience. He said, but if you were to go to McDonald's and have a bad burger, would that stop you from going to McDonald's again? And I said, well, Gunny, if it was my first time going to McDonald's, it certainly would stop me from ever going back to McDonald's again, because I would have to assume that this is the type of burger McDonald's makes. So since this is my only experience with the Marine Corps, I have to assume that this is how you guys do business. So I went on and went through, and he said, take 90 days and think about it. I said, okay, I just tell you no in 90 days, and I did. And I went on to community college, and I ended up doing really well at the community college because I really thought like this is my last opportunity to turn things around. I'm not going to keep getting chances. I'm not the kid anymore that's taking care of my mom. I have to make something out of my life. So I go to community college, do well there, and then I transfer after like a year to the University of Alabama, and I'm there, and my grades are really good, but I still live the same life. Like I have taken the culture that I have and pretty much all the bad things, and I have taken it into the college environment, which the college environment was essentially the culture that I came from. I tell people that at the University of Alabama's campus at the time, it was Sodom and Gomorrah-esque.
Hedonism without restraint.
Yes, you got a bunch of kids there that can do whatever they want to do, no really adult supervision.
That's right.
So in this, you're an adult technically, but it's extended adolescence. All the freedom without the responsibility, for the most part. So I'm there doing my same old thing. At the time, I think from my upbringing, that strength. I have just a misshapen image of what strength is, especially in a man. I think strength is, okay, how many women can you have? And so I go about that business, and it's like, okay, and go on. And I used to think, actually, I had in my mind that I would never get married, and from a different place that Deborah came from, but I had in my mind from the other side, as a man that had seen, and I said, why would I get married? I don't have any intentions of doing the right thing. And I knew people in my family, I knew other men that did this, that had the same intentions that I had, which is to say bad intentions. But they got married, and I thought, well, nobody forces you to do that, so why would I take some
complicates everything?
right? Why would I take some unsuspecting woman and lie in front of everybody that I am going to be right and be faithful to her and do all these things? And I know I don't have any intention of doing it, so I had the bright idea. I just won't. It wasn't from a moral place. It was a practical thing for me. I just won't get married. I'll just be single for all my life. So I go through that, and I'm finally making my way to law school. Go through, get to law school, and that kind of picks up where Deborah's, where our stories intersect. In that contracts class, I get there and I see Deborah, and I think, oh, she is pretty, and we don't really talk or anything. But after that first semester, she said, I ended up making an A+, and we wound up studying together. And she told you about the flissy thing, but we started talking on the phone, and hanging out for the most part, studying. And she, on, I think it was Valentine's Day. I know it was Valentine's Day. Okay, 2006, seven, had to be 7. I called her, and thinking, like, okay, she's surely going to have plans, but the worst thing that can happen is she tells me, yeah, I have plans, and nothing changes about my situation. So I called her and said, hey, you have any plans? And I didn't know any of this, the background that she had just given or things she had gone through. But I said, do you have plans? And she said, no, I don't. I said, well, would you like to go out with me? So we went out on a date for Valentine's Day. And after that, she invited me to church on a Wednesday night, and I liked her, and I had been to church before, different churches. Like, well, yeah, you're gonna be there. I want to hang out with you. You're there. I'll come too. So that Wednesday night, like she said, she didn't prepare me for what I was about to walk into. So I'm going through, and I end up in the altar. And at the time, I thought I was blending in, but there were a lot of people. And now I realize, like, when you come in off the streets, though it looks like, oh man, look at this large group of people.
You're a target.
Right. Yeah. I had no idea. I was like, okay, all these people, I'm going to be a target. If I stay back here in the pews, I'll be standing on my own. So I just move with the herd. And I go down to the front, and I'm just standing there. And next thing you know, some brothers come over and they start praying for me. It's like they swarm, and I can remember people praying, and I'm just looking around like, what is happening here? And someone's trying to hold my hands up, and I don't know anything about the Holy Ghost at this point. I'm like, the guys in the Bible, we don't know that there is any Holy Ghost. So one of the brothers says, open your mouth. And I'm thinking, whatever I do here tonight, it will not be open my mouth. I'm not doing that. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not doing it. And so once they were done, because like I said, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what the goal is. So I just know I'm not participating. My goal, our goals were counter. My goal is to get out.
Another effective altar working experience.
Yes. Yeah. My goal is to get out. And once I got out, I've told Deborah many times that had it been a guy that invited me or a girl that I was just kind of lukewarm about, I probably wouldn't have come back. But I said, I came back, but I had a plan this time. I said, I'm going to come, I'm going to sit through the service. And then when the altar call comes, they won't get me with that whole come down to the front thing. So we're back, and Deborah, the altar call comes, and Deborah's like, "Are you coming?" I was like, "Nope, I'm good." So I stayed back in the pew, and then shortly after that, you invited me to the Bible study, pretty my home Bible study, but it was here at the church. So I started coming to the Bible study, and the things that that we were going over in the Bible study, the covenant requirements, baptism in Jesus' name, being filled with the Holy Ghost, those things, the way you explained it and the way you walked through the scripture really made sense to me. And I credited some to that I wasn't really churched, so I didn't really have a tradition to look at the Bible through. All I had was black and white. It's like, okay, well, when you explain this, like, okay, well, this makes sense. And like Deborah said, as we're going through the study, I'm starting to see things. I'm starting to not only see the Word of God, but I'm starting to see your family, you and your marriage, your kids, and other families in the church. And I started to put things together like it was different from the other places I had been, other churches I had been. Even going back to my young experience with the missionaries, I started to think, these people are serious about this. That just really spoke loudly to me. Like, okay, they believe this, and I know they believe it because they actually live it, and I was seeing fruit. So Deborah and I are going through the Bible study, and I eventually see it as well. Okay, I need to be baptized, and so our relationship is progressing. We're progressing in learning about God, and I end up getting baptized on Mother's Day of 2007. Baptized, getting the Holy Ghost in the baptistry there, and I start thinking, it was never that I thought, because people ask me sometimes, like, when did you know that your wife was marriage material? And I said, well, it wasn't so much that I ever questioned whether she was marriage material. I always questioned whether I was marriage material. As a matter of fact, it was a resounding no in my mind. But I started to see, and it looking at you and the Word of God and the people of God, my whole view of things shifted. My view of strength as a man shifted. It went from strength is have as many women as you can to commit to one woman. Make a commitment today, and it doesn't matter who comes along. I am committed to being faithful to God and to my wife, to my family, because so once I started to see that, it was like, okay, I can maybe do this thing. It wouldn't be as hard as I thought it would be.